Welcome to Story Groups. Psalm 107 says, "Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story." Here at Village Church, we call ourselves storytellers for a reason, because we've taken that passage to heart. Our mission statement says we exist to share our stories with Christ so that others can have their own story with Him.
Yeah, we see in Matthew 28 that Jesus gave a charge to His disciples. He said, "Go into all the world and make disciples." But there's a statistic now that 95% of Christians have zero intentions of ever sharing their faith. And we think a big reason is because they just don't know how, just don't know what exactly am I sharing. And so Story Groups is designed to empower every single Christian, every believer, every follower to go and make disciples.
Right. In 1 Peter chapter 3, it explains that we should always be prepared to give a reason for the hope that we have. And so that's part of this series. What you're going to be learning and experiencing here is your reason for your hope. And so we're so excited to see what's going to come out of this.
Yeah, in Story Groups, you're going to learn what is your story. We're going to help you identify what that is and be able to tell it. You're also going to practice and learn when to share that and how to share that effectively, and also identify who needs to hear it.
So we've established that we're storytellers. But what is a story? Well, if we think of a story as a book, and if we break that book down into its different chapters and paragraphs and even sentences, we can see that so many things go into making up a good story. Well, in Story Groups, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be unpacking the three components of our story with Jesus and how those things have shaped who we are through His transformative work and presence in our lives.
Yeah, the first component of that, of your story, is who were you before Jesus? Now, this could be your salvation story. This could be who were you before you met Jesus for the first time. Or it could also be maybe you grew up in the church or you've been a Christian for a while, but there was still something in your life that needed an encounter with Jesus. So in this first part, you're going to identify who was I before meeting Jesus. And this is so important that we get down the first part of it, because the next part rolls right in to developing that.
Right. And so it's great to establish who you were before Jesus, but then there has to be that moment when you meet Jesus, right? And so every part of our story, there's moments where He intersects with our lives, right? There's a major moment that starts with our salvation, but then even after that, He's constantly doing new works and amazing things in our lives. And so that's the next important component of this story. How did you encounter Christ? In what way did you meet Him? And how did He then transform you miraculously?
Right, so the last part of telling your story is, who are you since meeting Jesus? And I love this question because it does point to transformation. Jesus never enters the scene to leave us the same. And so if we identify who was I before, how I met Him or how I encountered Him in that area of my life, then we can say, and now this is the work that He has done.
So we've unpacked what it means to be a storyteller, and we've broken down what that story looks like into three distinct sections. And so we want to give you a few tips on telling your story and what it looks like to really share it in an actual context. So the first thing that we have to understand is that your story matters, and every aspect of your story matters. Typically, as Christians, we can get paralyzed by fear sometimes about telling our story because we think that our story might be shameful, or that it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, and who would want to hear my story. But the truth is that Psalm 107 says, "Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story," for a reason, because every story of redemption matters. And every detail in that redemptive story matters. People in your context are desperate to hear your story. Not my story, not Ashley's story, not anybody else's story. Your story specifically.
Yeah, pray for courage as you start this process. The second tip we want to share with you is keep it simple. The goal that we are trying to achieve is a story that can be told in 2 to 3 minutes, because you want to be ready to share that story at the drop of a hat. So an example, the other day I was having breakfast with my friend, and our waitress started sharing that she's going through a divorce and her son is taking it pretty hard. And she actually was moved to tears, so worried about her son and how this was going to affect him. And I was able to share with her very quickly that I come from a divorced family, and my parents got divorced the same age that her son was divorced. That's how God works. He sets up moments like that. And I was able to share, that really was hard for me and it wrecked me, but until I encountered Jesus. And then he brought healing to me and a plan and purpose for my life. And now I'm married and have no plans ever to be divorced. And so I'm a generation changer. So if you see, that was quick. I mean, that was less than 1 minute that I just shared, even with you. And so we want to keep it simple, 2 to 3 minutes long.
Absolutely. And you'll notice too that Ashley didn't use big Christianese words in that, right? She didn't talk about her salvation experience or asking Jesus into her heart or anything else that we can often get trapped into by using these words that really don't make sense to the outside world. And so make sure that your story is the way you would tell it. Use your words. Don't try to pull out scripture all the time, and don't try to pull out words that you think your pastor would use. Just be real about it. Say, this is what happened, and this is what transformed my life because of it.
Yeah, we're real people, and we want to share it in a real way. The last, or another tip that we want to share with you is that the last part of that storytelling component can be kind of hard sometimes. The who am I since meeting Jesus? And so another question you might ask as you develop it yourself is, what truth do you know now that you didn't know before? And so that can be something very simple, like I wasn't sure how to confront these certain issues in my marriage, but then Jesus came in and he reminded me that he's given me every single thing I need to be a devoted follower. And it could be something more broad or something bigger, like I wasn't sure that I had a plan or a purpose in this life, and that was really affecting me. But when I met Jesus, he said, I have a plan. I created you for something specific, and now that's developing in my life. And so what truth do you know now that you didn't know before?
Absolutely. So in this next section, you're going to actually get a piece of paper from your leader, and that piece of paper is going to be broken down into those 3 sections of your story. And so as homework, we want you guys to take that piece of paper home and write out each one of those sections of your story. And then we want you to kind of recite it out loud 3 times so you can kind of own it, because the kicker is next week when you come back, you're going to be sharing that story. And so because we know that that can be a little bit scary, we need your commitment. We need you to commit to coming back and sharing that story. Even people in the room with you right now need to hear your story with Jesus, because you know what? There's transformative work that's happened in your life that maybe hasn't happened in their life yet. And you know what? There's transformative works that happened in their life that maybe haven't happened in your life yet. And so because of that, it's so important to come back, to commit to this process, because we promise you're going to grow and everyone around you will grow as well.
Yeah, your story not only matters for other people, it matters for you.
Yeah.
We have found that there have been people that have been Christians for a decade or longer and still don't know why.
Yeah.
When you ask them, why are you a Christian? What did Jesus do? They say, I don't know. And so this process is just as important for you as it is for other people. And in story groups over the times we've done it, we found that as people share it, their faith grows and they're more bolstered in confidence, because often when you share it, someone else can identify with that, even in your small little setting. And so be brave, don't bolt, commit to coming back, and we look forward to sharing with you next week.